Why feminism always loses. You cannot really talk about feminism in the 21st century without also talking about anti-feminism. But to get straight to the point, I think the primary reason why feminism loses, and it especially lost the culture war of the 2010s, is because feminists always fall for the apex fallacy. They always get the strongest, most successful, most aggressive, most abrasive man and prop him up as if he is representative of the group, which simply isn't the case. Even as someone who witnessed like the anti-feminist movement unfold from its like nascent form all the way to its full-blown anti-feminist like expression, it was mostly like the leaders of the group were like very like they had very dominant personalities, but the rank and file, most of them at that time when it first began, they were like very socially awkward, mostly white males from suburban backgrounds who had very little experience with women. And they were projecting a lot of their fears and anxieties about women onto feminists. And feminists sort of like played into this like trap. It's like they projected all of their fears and anxieties onto feminists. And the feminists were just playing into this trap where they kept acting like a way that was so like alienating to these guys. One thing you need to understand is men at that age, like around like let's say between 12 and like 17, they are extremely needy of female approval. Really, they want women to like. It's really like after like those years when men begin to become more like confident. Before that, they are extremely needy of like female approval. And women in this situation, they hold a lot of moral and social and cultural power over men. And I think these guys, like the feminists, reacted in a very poor way to this. And they kept doubling down. Every time they doubled down, they built up this like backlash. That all these guys, they were anonymous online, so they could say and do whatever they want. And they were able to construct this like narrative around themselves, which wasn't completely untrue. This like persecution narrative they had around themselves, because it's not necessarily that men are being persecuted, but that everyone isn't doing well under the current system. And because men previously did very well in the previous system and aren't doing well in this system, and they're comparing past generations of men, like during like the Cold War in the 1950s throughout the Cold War, to this current generation of men, they feel it allowed them to construct this like persecution complex, especially towards a demographic of people that they were trying to like gain the approval of. It was like the perfect storm. And of course, over time, white nationalism began to get infused with it, which was like very negative for the development of like white males. And I think it had a very negative, it continues to have a very negative impact on white males and today and going forward. But I think had the feminists had, unfortunately, like no one is privy to all the info. No one has access to all the information and all of the like social trends going around them. No one has access to all the information, so probably the feminists did not really know like the situation they were in, and they wound up getting trounced online by all of these guys who were basically just a bunch of reactionaries who had no end goal in mind. They were just venting their frustrations. A lot of it sexual frustration. A lot of it like feelings of powerlessness and feeling alienated. Because during that time in your development, women hold a lot of power. They hold a lot of cultural power, a lot of sexual power, a lot of like the society sort of like appeals to them, and these guys feel alienated. It's pretty unfortunate because it allowed the rise of a lot of other very negative influences that continue to negatively influence male lives. It was like the internet allowed male puberty to go on steroids. That's like the best way you can explain it. The anti-feminist backlash of the 2010s was basically men's puberty on steroids. I remember watching this video of Elon Musk, and he says like the internet is basically just like the human id, and we're like watching the human id in its raw form on the internet, just raw on the internet. And that's like how I saw it. It's like the 2010s anti-feminist backlash was like the teenage male id on display for the world to see. The freeing of the male id. And I think it was a lot of the like things that men did online to women in reaction were things I think a lot of feminists were not really like used to. They used to fighting like conservatives with like Christian values, but these guys, they were like very, very radical. They were very, very alienated. They felt very, very powerless. Even though the powerlessness, it was a lot of it was like, it's like their feelings of powerlessness stemmed from them being relatively powerless when compared to men of previous generations. And even in today's world, they have more power than other groups. But still, they were able to construct this like narrative around themselves where they felt powerless, and the feminists were like the people in charge. It was like almost like they had this like nagging. It was like this nagging teacher effect. Like these teenage boys were rebelling against like these nagging teachers, and a lot of these guys were like Gen Z. I remember one guy. He was like, I was really surprised. He was like maybe 15, 13 or something. I was really, really surprised. A lot of these guys are very, very young. And they were very, very sheltered. And they did know how to react around women. And some of their first experiences with women were very, very negative. And they were very, very confrontational. And there's no telling what kind of impact this is going to have on their development and has had on their development. As you can see, the Trump phenomenon is primarily in the 2020s, primarily in the 2010s, is primarily a male-driven phenomenon. There is no in the political rift in America is a gender rift. There is no telling how much damage the anti-feminist culture war of the 2010s will have on the male psyche going forward. A lot of the trends seem to be negative, and had the feminists reacted differently, had they had access to more information, had they perhaps not been so like hubristic, had they had not had so much hubris in their belief that they had won the culture war, perhaps things would be different right now.